What's up, guys? I'm gonna make a quick video showing you guys how I assemble the heads. Getting ready to put this engine back together. Sorry, I sound like crap. I sound like a 90-year-old man that's been smoking my whole life. I got, I don't know, allergies or something. I've been to the doctor twice and they say there's nothing wrong with me. So I'm gonna show you how to set up a head using a spring micrometer to get your spring height right for your installed height and pressure. This one's real simple because I've done this thing a million times. I haven't really changed anything in this part of my engine in 5 years probably. So show you how to install them, measure them, and get your spring height right. Typically on spring height, what people want is within 60 thousandths of coil bind, which if you don't know what coil bind is on a spring, you don't need to be setting up heads anyway. But that's the maximum amount that these things can be compressed before they basically turn into a solid instead of a spring. So you want to be, no closer than 60 thousandths. Ideally, you want to be, somewhere close to it because it reduces harmonics. But, majority of engines, you guys aren't spinning enough RPM for it really to make that big of a difference. So you just want to make sure that at your max lift, that you are not hitting coil bind, because if you do that, it'll destroy everything on your engine. Your push rods won't live, your rocker arms will break, it'll tear up the heads, everything. So, stay at least 60 thousandths away from that. And how you come up with that number is your gross lift minus valve lash. So, if you got just for easy math, say a 700 lift cam, and your valve lash is say 20 thousandths, you don't want to be any more or any, you want to be at least 680 thousandths above your coil bind. So if that were to be 1 inch, which that's not a real number, but if it was 1 inch, you'd want to make sure your installed height is no less than 1.680. So it's pretty simple. Everybody thinks there's like some crazy voodoo in this stuff. Is really not. You just have to make sure that all your parts are good and that you match them accordingly. Even when it comes down to your keepers, there's two different common kinds of keepers. There's beadlock and square groove. And then there's also 7 and I think 11 is the other one. But make sure that all of your parts are matched up. Your keepers, your retainers, and then also your valves. Make sure your valves match your keepers, because that's where you'll really run into problems. So I use all beadlock stuff. That's what I like. I've used square groove stuff. Square groove, it seems like it locks onto the valve a little harder. It's harder to get on and off. And honestly, I think beadlocks are a little bit stronger because the shape of it being round, it goes into the valve farther. So I feel like it's got more material that it would have to shear off to come loose. But I've talked to Pack and Crower and Victory, everybody, and everybody's got the common answer. There's not one that's better than the other. It's preference. So beadlocks are my preference. So to set up a set of heads, all you need is your spring pockets. You got to have something hardened underneath your spring pockets, or the inside of your spring pockets of your head. You can't have your spring riding on aluminum. So I always use a style that it's a cup. Spring cups, another thing that everybody calls them. They can also be just flat, like this is a shim, but a shim will also do what that needs to do. I like the pocket style because it keeps the spring from moving over into the head. So definitely prefer that. You just need, of course, your valves, your springs, your retainers, and your keepers, and a valve mic or a spring mic. So this just goes in place of a valve spring. Super simple to use, really easy to read. You just stick it in there, and that's how you measure your installed height. I'll show you how to do that. And then you just need another, a digital mic or caliper, or whatever you want to call those. So that is what you use to check your shim stack. So I'll show you guys how to do that here in a second. But yeah, it's real simple. This head's already cleaned up, ready to go. The valve job's been done. Use assembly lube on the valves when I stick them in the guides, just to make sure everything doesn't start up dry. Yeah, so I'm gonna get started on this thing. So first thing you want to do is take all your spring cups, and I've got 2 different styles here, so I just want to make sure I put them all where they're supposed to be. So these are all the bigger ones. So very first thing you do when you're going to measure for your springs or for your installed height is you stick your cups in the heads with no shims. And these ones were in the head, so I got to make sure that there's nothing on them still, which I've cleaned all these parts. I know there's no shim, but that's really easy to do, especially if you're at the track, is your shims will stick to your spring cups, and it really makes it a pain in the butt. That one is going to kick my butt. Let me grab a magnet here. See if I can find my magnets. What I did with those. There's one. So this one. These heads have been cut, so it's important to pay attention to stuff like that too. So these spring cups have a smaller ID, and I've cut these heads to get the right installed height before, which it's something you might have to do if you can't get it down enough. So these ones have to take these other spring cups on the intake valve side because they have a larger ID on them. These ones should work on all the exhausts. Yeah, these will go. Stick the ones on there. So now that you got that done, you will take your spring mic, bottom it out, stick it on there just like you imagine it were to be a spring. Stick your retainer on there, grab a couple of keepers. It's really important too, like, if you didn't buy the parts new and you took some heads apart and you're going to put them back together, you really got to make sure that your keepers are the same. So sometimes you'll need a different keeper on the exhaust side versus the intake side to get your installed height correct. These ones are just standard beadlock titanium keepers from PAC, and I use them on both the intake and the exhaust side of this head. Another thing to keep in mind too is a standard height keeper from PAC is not the same height as a standard height keeper from Manley or anybody else. So just because they are both standard doesn't mean they're the same. So keep that in mind. Like if you measuring, you want to order some different keepers to get your installed height different, you can't just, if you got PAC keepers, call it Manley, get some standard ones to replace it and expect them to be the same. Or if you need something different, keep that in mind too, that different brands might get you where you need to be. So once you put that in here, as a spring, you just extend this up and screw it out until it stops. You don't crank on it or anything like that, just till it stops. Another thing I really like about beadlock style keepers is that when you get to this point, that's where it's going to be. There's no movement. If you were using a square groove at this point, you would have to take a hammer and tap on that a little bit and then tighten it some more, because when it grabs on inside of the groove, there's some play there, and you got to really tap it to make sure that you're getting an accurate measurement. Otherwise your measurement's going to be different every time. It's not going to be right. So now that I've got this in here, I just read this. So when you screw this out, you can read the numbers on there, and the range of this. So I think this thing goes up to it's from the smallest is 1 inch, and then it goes up to I think 2.5 or something like that. But so the 0 mark on here, that would be 2 inches, and then the next one is the next decimal point. So this is 2 inch 100, and then I'm almost to 10. So it's 09, so it's 2.109 is the measurement. So as you do each valve, you write it on the head. If I could write, it'd be a lot more legible. But so you go through, you measure each of these numbers. I'm not going to video that because I'll make this video a whole lot longer, but measure them, and then you write what you get when you mic them for each valve in the corresponding spot, so you can go back through. All right, so now I've got all of my heights, the spring height with the retainer and the keeper and the spring cup in there. So now I know what they are with no shims. So now once I've got that done, I wanted to show you also how you come up with what your installed height should be. So your spring box, this is a spring I've ran forever, so I already know how to set these up, but I'm going to show you guys. So we're on a PAC 1350. The coil bind is on here. It's 1.130. So you take that number and you take your valve, your gross valve lift, which this one I can't even remember what it is. I want to say like 860. So we're going to add that to it. So plus 860. So that gives us 1.990. So that is our gross valve lift. So to get our net valve lift, you subtract your lash, which my hot lash is about 20. So you minus that, so it'd be 0, 7, 9, 1. So 1.970, and then that 60 thousandths. You want to stay, if it gets close, you can really split hairs, but at least 60 thousandths away is my rule of thumb. I don't know if that's right or wrong or what, but that's what I've used forever. Never had a problem. So you add 60 thousandths to that. So let's see, 3, 0. So 2.030 is going to be my minimum installed height, which also on pack springs, they put the specs on the box. So they recommend install these at 2200, which, you get 440 on the seat if you do that. So that's probably a pretty good place to install them. But I try and keep it a little bit closer because, that would be, 1.70 or 0.170 away from coil bind. So 170 thousandths is quite a bit away. So I've always ran these at 2" 100 installed height. So, I'm still, what would that make me? About 130 thousandths away. So, that's not a bad area, which that doesn't add up. I don't know what I did on that first deal, but I'm about 130 thousandths away from it at 70 over. So it'd be like 200 thousandths then according to that. So, I probably am somewhere in the neighborhood of like 450 to 460 on the seat installed pressure. But I'm away from coil bind. So that open, these are 1129 at 1.20. So, I'm running a little bit tighter than that. So I'm probably around 1,200 pounds, which works good for my combo. As those springs wear a little bit, it keeps me in, but that's the most important thing, is just to make sure that you never hit coil bind. So now that you have, if this were our installed number, which I use 2" 100. So now what you do is you take your installed height that you measured with no shims in there, and you take, whatever you need to for shims to get it to 2" 100 in this case, which my intakes, none of them need shims. And, they're 2" 109 on that one, which is close enough. When you're thinking about a spring and what difference it makes, that isn't an important change in pressure. All of my exhausts, I'm about 120 out. So to get there, I need to shim the bottom of the spring up 120 thousandths to get to my 2" 100. If you needed to be, say on this one, 2" 100, and this were to measure 2 inch, you can get different keepers that move that groove up, 50 or 100 or whatever. You can also get different retainers to do that stuff too. All of this stuff standard. The most important thing though is just making sure that you get stuff that matches. Like I use all pack stuff. You can switch brands, but you have to make sure that the angle of the keeper is right. And you also have to make sure that, the groove is the same type, like I said earlier. So now that I've got this, I'm just going to do this exhaust valve to show you guys what you do and how to do it, just so that the video is not 10 hours long while I sit there and set these heads up. So it's 2.220. So I need 120 thousandths of shim. So I've got all of these different shims. So you take your mic here and you measure it. So it's about 53. So I'm going to need at least 2 of those. And all these they're kind of standard, like 60, 30, and 15 thousandths, but none of them really ever measure that. So, that one's 54. So you can add those 2 together. See, so I need 120 and I'm already at 114. So, you can take some of these real thin ones in if you need to, and you can kind of just play around and figure out the combo. So that's a little bit too much. So if I get rid of one of those, grab a couple of these. I wanted to get rid of one of those. A couple of these. Yeah, see, so that's 119. So that's close enough. So once you get that measurement there, see, you take that spring pocket or the spring cup back out, and you stick your shim stack down in there. Stick your spring cup back on top of it. Once you do this enough, you get comfortable. You don't need to remeasure it, but if you're not 100% comfortable, it's a good idea to remeasure it. So now you go back and stick your spring mic back in there, and you should get your installed height after you get your shims in there. So screw that bad boy down. Again, like if you guys are using square groove valves, it's real important when you get to this step to tap on the valve and make sure that the keepers are slid all the way up in that groove. Bead locks, you don't have to do that. And if you're doing it on a bench and you got rags too, make sure that none of the rags can ever get up in between the valve and the head, because that'll jack you up too and you won't get right measurements. And trust me, it's really easy to do. So now, with that, I'm 2.109. So close enough for me. I don't know, that shim stack should have got me a little closer than that, but either way, that's where I need to be. I might be compressing it a little bit harder with this spring mic than I did with the micrometer over there. So, or caliper, whatever you guys want to call it. Everybody calls them different things. I don't know the right word for it, but anyway, that's how you do it. That's how you set up cylinder heads. Super easy. Don't be afraid to do it. Everybody makes it seem like there's some science there, but the biggest thing is just making sure your parts are matched up and that everything's in good shape while you're doing all this stuff. Inspect everything, go over, your retainers and keepers, make sure nothing's cracked and looks like it's starting to give out. You can see wear in this stuff before it's bad. Everybody, they replace their retainers a lot more than I do. I don't really understand that because those things are freaking expensive. So these ones are like, I think they've got 2 full seasons on them already. My installed height that doesn't change. That's something that I do to keep an eye on this stuff. And I also keep an eye on valves doing that. So, if you feel like you got a valve going away, you can always measure it this way too. And I don't ever keep record of this, but I mean, if you are meticulous enough to do that, you can do that and keep your measurements and then go back and look at it, see if your seats are moving, your valve's stretching, whatever. But yeah, it's how you set up cylinder heads. Don't be afraid to do it. It's a piece of cake.